We've got a Batman movie out, so it's time for me to talk about another Batman, The Dark Knight Rises. I don't hate this movie. I think it's pretty good, just not as good as Begins or Dark Knight. Having said that, here's what I would do differently with this movie. Begin with Gotham already under siege. It's almost halfway into the movie before we see Batman, and unlike Begins, where it takes about that long for us to see him, Bruce is at least proactive in that movie, and doing Batmanly things, even if he isn't quite there yet. In this movie, Bruce just sits around for a while before deciding to take action. If you begin with Bane already in charge of the city, you get to the juicy stuff much sooner, and drop hints about how we got here along the way. We don't need 45 minutes building up to the good stuff that people came to the movie to see. Alfred doesn't leave for 90% of the movie, and helps the Resistance with strategy, since he has a military background. In the comics, Alfred left Bruce for a time in the mid-90s when he felt Bruce was going too far, but that works in the comics in a way that it doesn't work in a done-in-one movie. In the comics, he could be gone for a year, and you'd feel the effect his absence has on Bruce, but this movie has less than 3 hours, and there's a whole lot of balls to juggle. It feels jarring for Alfred to yell at Bruce for a couple of scenes and leave only to come back at the end of the movie. I get the mechanical reason why this was done. We need Bruce to hit rock bottom, emotionally and figuratively. Alfred leaves him, he loses his company, he gets his back broken. He's much more likely to open up to Miranda Tate when all this bad stuff piles on his soul. But I still feel Alfred could be put to better use in this movie. He was a huge part of Begins and Dark Knight, but he's got about 5 minutes here. When an important part of the first two installments of your trilogy is nearly absent in part 3, it feels weird. Even if his only role is him having meaningful conversations with Bruce like he did in the first two movies, that's still better than him being absent entirely. Get rid of Talia and let Bane be the main bad guy. The Ducard is actually Ra's al Ghul reveal from Begins worked because we knew Ducard was willing to oppose Bruce before the end of Act 1. So the only twist was he still was near the end of Act 2. But with Rises, we have to accept Miranda was an evil supervillain the whole time and that she's Ducard's daughter. Two big twist pills to swallow within seconds of each other, and about 15 minutes of movie left. This reveal isn't given enough room to breathe and have the desired effect. Let Bane be the child of Ra's al Ghul. Who cares if comic book purists get mad? Essentially, you would consolidate two half-characters into one person. Take Talia's motivation from her info dump near the end and glue that onto Bane, the physical threat we've been following throughout the movie. I once said this reveal turns Bane into little more than hired muscle subservient to the main villain, which is how Bane was portrayed in Batman and Robin. Someone argued with me, saying Bane was more of an equal partner to Talia, but I never got that feeling. Once Talia starts giving her speech, I think Bane has one line of dialogue left. He's deflated as a threat, and what emotional connection he had to Bruce's past actions are now gone, leaving us with nothing. And if you're a Talia fan, I can't imagine you're happy with this movie since you only get Talia for less than 15 minutes. If you think having Bane be the actual fruit of Raz's loins somehow ruins his character or ruins Talia's, then just say Bane was once an ally to Raz, and for some reason was ousted from the League before Bruce met Ducard in Begins. Then he wants revenge for the death of the man he was still loyal to, despite getting kicked out of their league. That doesn't trample on Talia being Raz's daughter too much, and it still maintains our villain that we've been following throughout the entire movie. I wasn't crazy about immediately following The Dark Knight, all crime stopped, and Batman retired. Once again, I get what the movie is doing even if I don't like it. Batman fans are used to a Batman who intends to keep Batmaning until he dies, and then every orphan in Gotham City is in line to follow in his footsteps. It's a never-ending mission, but this is a Batman who sees this mission as finite. In the first two movies, his love for Rachel drives him just as much as his need to fix the city in a more permanent fashion. So Batman's self-sacrifice at the end of Dark Knight, permanently ending crime and allowing Bruce to finally take the break he's been working toward, I get it, but it seems mighty cartoonish that all crime conveniently ended thanks to the vague Harvey Dent bill. I know, no one wanted a Batman who rested on his laurels, gets taken by surprise, and has to rise, hence the title, to save the city once again. But thematically, you've already got connections to the previous movies. Bruce's professional relationship with Lucius and the Gotham PD would limit his effectiveness as Batman, especially if he's been wounded from his time in the trenches. That would allow for Bane to sweep in and take the city. I'd even be okay with the Harvey Dent bill, I promise, no pun intended, denting the crime in Gotham, but not actually ending it permanently, and Batman having to keep doing his thing, but in a less effective capacity, since he's also on the run from the cops, and he doesn't have Lucius giving him his wonderful toys. This can be dropped in dialogue throughout the movie, but Batman eventually got worn down from the years of combat and couldn't keep it up. When the movie begins, Bruce is still Batmaning, but it's mostly to be a symbol for the underground underground. Most of them don't know who Batman is, though secret identities are a moot point when the world is on fire, but the underground doesn't know Bruce is being held together by Band-Aid, so he's barely able to do stuff. But he puts on the costume, goes out, and does something not too difficult. It keeps up morale. I'd get rid of Matthew Modine's character. He was fine, nothing wrong with his performance, but this movie is picking up plot threads from the previous movies and introducing Catwoman, Bane, Robin, and Talia. And on top of all of that, you want us to care about this new character? Keep it simple, get rid of this guy, and focus on our other characters. If Modine's purpose was to show the people standing up to Bane, you can still do that with these guys. In fact, instead of Catwoman being responsible for helping Bane take the city, then feeling bad about it, she is part of the underground from the beginning. When Alfred needs someone to do some guerrilla tactics against Bane's men, Selena does it. Batman is more than just a man, and this movie tries to resurrect that theme with John Blake becoming Batman at the end, but you can do more with that throughout the movie. Selena helps keep the illusion of Batman alive in people's hearts. Selena and Bruce grew close in the months leading up to the movie, so it feels like their relationship doesn't come completely out of nowhere like it did in the film. Instead of Joseph Gordon-Levitt being John Robin Blake, I would have him play Jean-Paul Valley, an agent of an ancient secret society going back to the Crusades called the Order of St. Dumas. Ducard would have told Bruce about the Order if he had joined them, but he never got around to it. Or if you don't like an ancient secret society, which we already had in Begins, so having another one warring with the League of Shadows, that's not too much of a plausible stretch, but if you don't like this, let this guy be Jason Todd. He's an orphan like Jason, and seeing him risk his life to save other orphans, it'd be nice to see Jason end up in a better place than being beaten to death with a crowbar, then be resurrected into a crabby, trigger-happy anti-hero. Nolan wanted to explore Batman is more than Bruce Wayne. What better way to do that than Robin picking up the mantle? Since this movie was so hyped, people combed through every Batman comic until they found a kid named John Blake from 1942, and they assumed the movie was referencing this comic. Nolan probably felt he couldn't name the guy after an actual Robin, so he went with a new name, so press reports naming this character before the movie came out wouldn't tell people where this movie was going. Not to mention, Bale was none too keen on Robin showing up, so maybe Nolan thought he had to trick Bale. So don't tell people who Levitt is playing before the movie comes out. Let people postulate. Then in the movie, oh, he's Jason Todd. Okay. Bane breaking Batman would take place earlier in the movie. You'd have more Batman stuff in the first half hour, so the middle chunk would be Batman Light, where Batman's supporting cast sees their beacon of hope get crushed. But despite Bane's efforts, the people of Gotham don't lose hope. They keep fighting back because Batman's changed them for the better over the years. After Bane breaks Bruce, he doesn't take him to the Middle East and drop him in a pit. He breaks him and leaves him for dead, and the underground save him. Bruce's recovery is a metaphorical pit he rises from. We don't need the actual pit it takes half an hour of movie time to get out of. Since we're spending more time in Gotham, I'd like to see an expansion of the scene where Gordon finds out Bruce is Batman. Much like how Alfred felt more integral in the previous two movies, Gordon felt like he had more of a connection with Batman in the previous two movies. But in this one, they get one scene in a hospital, then Batman returns to Gotham, then Batman takes care of the bomb. 3 scenes. They may have had about that many scenes in previous movies. In Begins, there's Kid Bruce and Gordon, Stapler scene, Arkham scene, train scene, and roof scene. So only 5 scenes. Dark Knight has one roof scene between Harvey, Bruce, and Gordon. Batman is at the police station with Gordon when he interrogates Joker. Then they're held captive by Harvey before Batman runs off. 4 scenes if you count Bruce asking if he should go to the hospital. So Rises, it's not like they decrease the connection between these two really, but I still feel like as the conclusion to this trilogy, their scenes should have been bigger than what we got in previous films. The end of the movie can more or less be the same, with a bomb threat, and Selena, Bruce, and Jean-Paul are part of a 3-pronged attack to save the city. Bruce isn't back to his old fighting strength, but he's well enough to fly a bomb out of the city. In a montage at the end, instead of a statue commemorating the Batman, we get a scene similar to the one that ended Batman Begins, with Gordon on the roof and Jean-Paul Valley and Selena meet with him. They agreed the city needs Batman, so the 3 of them will work together to maintain the illusion Batman is still alive, for Gotham's sake. Oh, and make Tom Hardy do a voice that doesn't sound like Sean Connery's impression of Barney. This would look quite a bit different than the Rises we got, but most of the pieces here are still there in the movie. They're just rearranged differently. Like I said, I don't hate Rises. I just think it could have been a little better than what we got. What do you guys think? Let me know, and in the meantime, I'll see you guys in the future. Have a good one.